Sure, you can avoid a horrible ending, but the whole game's an ethical tightrope. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. Today I want to talk about choice mechanics in video games and visual novels, specifically how the game School Days embodies all the things that can be frustrating when implemented poorly. You see, normally, choice mechanics, where the player is allowed to choose between various behavioral options, enhance a player's immersion, giving them a sense of personal consequence and responsibility over a story's outcome. Not only do choices let you customize your experience, they also give players a sense of control, with hopes of averting an otherwise tragic fate. Heck, sometimes choices are fun because you can explore other possibilities, particularly to see just how bad things can get. That said, there's always some dissonance between the devs and writers scripting these choices and the players actually experiencing them. Matters of interpretation get in the way, and, without care, choice mechanics can sometimes be incredibly annoying or unfair. Granted, sometimes this is done intentionally, like in the visual novel Kara no Shoujo. You play as a detective trying to catch an active serial killer who preys upon schoolgirls. While there are various happy endings to be found in the game, it's actually impossible to save one girl in particular. No matter what you choose, even uncovering the whole truth of the case, her fate is sealed, leaving you feeling helpless for both the first game and its sequel, which some might see as a second chance. It's brilliantly haunting, made all the better because it's frustrating. Still, most of the time, I find myself frustrated by choices not because of atmosphere, but by poor execution. Even the best of games have frustrating choices at times. Often, players will encounter moments where none of the choices provided reflect what they'd actually do in a situation. As South Park would say, it's like having to choose between a douche and a turd sandwich. Obviously, developers don't have the resources to provide every conceivable choice, but it can be irritating when players find there's a perfectly reasonable alternative not being offered. For instance, imagine playing a horror game with a monster on the loose. Your party decides it'd be best to split up and cover more ground, and you're given the choice between which group to join. Given how stupid splitting up is proven to be in media, it would seem wrong not to include an option where the player objects to the idea. Choices can be frustrating if they're too vague, leaving you with no indication of what your character will do in response to a given option. Imagine a dating sim in which you're trying to impress a girl on a date. You can choose to tell a joke, compliment her fashion, or turtle. Players will look at that and be like, what the hell does turtle mean? Does it mean I'll talk about turtles? Or perhaps turn into a turtle? Curious, you might choose turtle and find out there's apparently a turtle crossing the street, and you step in to move it out of danger, impressing your date through compassion. While this might be amusing, it's annoying to have to make the choice first, just to know what it's actually referring to. Mind you, this doesn't mean the outcome of your actions need to be revealed. Rather, it's good to know what a choice refers to in regards to what your character will actually say or do. For instance, having the choice between opening door A or door B. You don't have to know what's behind each door, but you at least know your character's gonna wind up opening one of them. An extension of this can come down to tone. The things we say in conversation can vary drastically in meaning by how we say them. Sarcasm is a fair example. Let's say you're choosing what a character says during a public speech. You might see one of the lines and think it'd make the crowd laugh if delivered sarcastically, only for the character to actually deliver the line deadpan. Perhaps the developers never considered this, instead funneling players into their train of thought. Choices can often be poorly placed. It's frustrating when you're given innocuous choices, such as what to eat for breakfast, but forced to watch when your character takes important actions, such as confessing to a girl or entering a dangerous building. Like, I don't see how choosing to eat waffles instead of cereal should be an indication of whether I'd choose to kill or spare my nemesis. On a related note, there are choices that express intent but not consequence. We'll go with a hypothetical situation in Fate. There are times when Shiro has to stop Saber from jumping recklessly into a fight, or placing all her bets on her noble phantasm at the cost of her life. In those cases, it would be reasonable to choose Stop Saber, but what if that choice doesn't specify how you'll do it? The player might intend to reason with Saber first, only to have Shiro use a command seal to stop her. Sure, you got the job done, but now you're down a command seal that you never authorized. In this scenario, it'd be more fair to let players first attempt to reason with Saber, and then, if she refuses to cooperate, give a second prompt to authorize use of a command spell. After all, most reasonable people tend to explore and test the waters before diving in headfirst. Choosing to agree with a bad guy one time, for instance, doesn't mean you've given the okay for your hero to turn to the dark side and attack their friends. Lastly, there are false or illusionary choices. This can refer to when you're given various options that all wind up doing the exact same thing, or choices presented to the player that the devs don't actually expect you to pick. Imagine choosing whether or not to pull the trigger of a gun and end someone's life. It'd be frustrating if you chose not to fire, only for your character to consider it for a brief moment before firing the gun anyway. Or when Princess Zelda asks Link if he's willing to go help her save Hyrule. Sure, you can choose no, but it just leads to Zelda telling you to reconsider, putting players in a loop until they finally choose yes. So now I hope you understand what I mean by frustrating choice mechanics. They're hard to avoid completely, and even the most thorough games have them. However, I can confidently say that I've never seen them all crammed into a single game. That is, aside from School Days. School Days is both an anime and visual novel, known most for its particularly graphic bad endings. The anime in particular is a sort of hybrid of the novel's other bad endings, resulting from the protagonist Makoto's absolutely horrible behavior in a love triangle gone wrong. Essentially, he gets one girl, Sekai, to help him start dating another, Kotonoha, only to start cheating on Kotonoha for not putting out. The more he sleeps with Sekai, the more confident he gets, until he's banging his other classmates. Things take a turn for the worst when Sekai supposedly gets pregnant, and fearing commitment, Makoto turns back to Kotonoha, who is the only other girl willing to sleep with him. The main two girls are driven insane by Makoto's infidelity, and a literal bloodbath ensues. The anime is a creative subversion of typical harem stories, featuring the most bland, spineless, indecisive piece of crap protag in dating sim history. The game, however, puts you in control of this sad sack of flesh, offering a series of exceptionally frustrating choice mechanics for you to navigate into 22 separate endings. The amount of content is impressive, and I do recommend you try it out for yourself, but boy is it a mess. To show just how frustrating the game's choices are, I'll be analyzing a playthrough where I legit try to be the most decent human being possible. While I managed to avoid any fatalities, I still feel like navigating Makoto through choices is harder than herding cats. Anyway, I'll quickly summarize events and circumstances, stopping only to give my thought process behind the choices I make. The story starts with Makoto timidly embracing his crush for Kotonoha. He takes a non-consenting photo of her. Apparently, keeping your crush as your phone's wallpaper is a good luck charm. Your classmate Sekai finds out and teases you about your crush. When she asks if you're doing the charm, you get your first choice. So what? Or no. Now, School Days is unique in that you can always stay silent, which counts as a choice in itself. So every time options are presented, I don't have to actually pick either of them. Of course, this has its own consequences. Still, the first choice is easy enough. While it's none of Sekai's business, I choose so what, because it'd be pretty weird to explain the photo otherwise. By doing so, I'm confirming my crush for Kotonoha. Worried that Sekai might blab about your crush to others, you physically threaten her to stay silent. Wow! I never authorized that. So right out of the gate our protag is being a huge jerk. Luckily, rather than calling the cops on us, Sekai instead offers to help us become Kotonoha's boyfriend. Basically, Sekai does all your stalking for you, reporting details about Kotonoha's school life. She even arranges for the three of you to eat lunch together on the rooftop, shoving Makoto's timid ass along the way. With the ice broken, Makoto decides to ask Kotonoha on a date, and Sekai asks what he has in mind. Our second choice is to either suggest going to a manga cafe, which sounds awesome to me, or going, Apparently Sekai doesn't approve of my choice. Guys gotta find an otaku girlfriend. They do exist. Regardless, you ask Kotonoha out and she accepts. Nice. Things are working out, so Makoto decides to thank Sekai, prompting her to kiss him. It was pretty obvious Sekai liked him to begin with. I feel bad for her, honestly, not just because she's fallen for an idiot like Makoto, but because her love is unrequited. Still, I don't think helping the guy you like get with another girl is a healthy way to deal with it. If I were in Makoto's shoes, I'd want to set boundaries immediately. If you're gonna break someone's heart, do it early before things develop too intimately. Thankfully, this becomes our next option. You can ask, "Why did you kiss me?" or "About what happened yesterday?" Both at least bring up the kiss, but I'd prefer to be direct, no beating around the bush. Sekai tries to downplay the kiss as her enacting the kind of romance dramas she sees on TV. I personally wouldn't let the conversation end like that. Sadly, the next choice does nothing to accomplish this. We can choose between "I think Sekai" and "I think I..." What the hell does that mean? It could be anything. I think Sekai is best waifu. I think Sekai shouldn't have kissed me. Or, I think I have a fuda fetish. We're left interpreting what is meant by these vague-ass choices. I choose I think I, in hopes that Makoto will consider how he feels about the two girls and make a snappy decision. Of course, that's not at all what the choice meant. Instead, he's all, I think I might like Sekai after all. Wouldn't the other choice have been better suited to that? Thanks, game. Here I am trying to turn Sekai down, and the exact opposite happens because of poorly worded options. Luckily, we get to redeem this right away, as the next choice is either to pick I like Sekai after all, or nothing. This is the first time I felt it fitting not to respond. Don't want the game putting words in my mouth. Makoto finally responds appropriately, and realizes he's already dating a different girl. Not that I have anything against Sekai, rather the game tried to force me down her route without my consent. That said, it's time to start eating lunch with Kotonoha alone on the rooftop, but the game tempts us once more, asking if we should invite Sekai along still. Of course, I choose to just go with Kotonoha. While Sekai could still be around as a friend, the whole point of this arrangement was to kick off a monogamous relationship. If anything, keeping Sekai involved further would just hurt her more in the long run. Makoto tries to complain about this, suggesting it's either restrictive or awkward for there to suddenly be only two people eating together. I choose to shut him up by saying nothing. When Kotonoha asks why Sekai isn't at lunch, I tell it like it is. There's no reason to lie. Some forced drama comes into play when Kotonoha tries to ask Makoto to call her by her first name, like I've already been doing. She gets embarrassed and stops halfway through. She tries to say, oh, it's nothing, but I insist she tell me. Communicating is key after all. She tries to explain herself again, but gives up once more. Back in class, Sekai asks if we enjoyed our lunch. I said it was fun. I know what the game's trying to get me to do, but I won't let it. Makoto thinks to himself, wondering what Kotonoha was trying to tell him earlier. We get the choice of whether to worry she was planning to break up with us, or whether to consider if what she had to say was important. It's never a good thing to jump to conclusions, or get needlessly accusatory. That said, Kotonoha's shy and is letting this silence her. We need her to feel comfortable expressing her feelings, so I choose the bottom option. Problem is, she's bothered by my persistence. We can't force her to open up, so I guess we'll just leave her be. Sekai notices you looking depressed. We can either push her away, or mention someone else also noticed him looking depressed. There's no reason to be a jerk to Sekai, so I choose the bottom one. There's nothing wrong with feeling down about the situation. Still, after just one date, Makoto's whining about Kotonoha's shyness and how much it's causing him to suffer. He's not very patient, and thinks that Sekai is easier to talk to. Sure, Sekai and Makoto have more initial rapport, but relationships take time. Just because Makoto and Kotonoha aren't close yet, doesn't mean they can't warm up to each other. Thus, when he considers jumping ship for Sekai, I have him stick to his guns. Being indecisive is just going to hurt everyone more. So we made Kotonoha upset earlier in the day. As such, when we're given the choice on whether or not to call her or wait till tomorrow, I choose the phone. Sometimes it's easier to express your feelings on the phone rather than in person. That said, I'm not calling to force her into anything. I merely choose to apologize and hopefully explain my side of things. This works out, and Kotonoha finally feels comfortable enough to ask us to call each other by first name. What can I say? Some relationships need baby steps. Makoto scores free tickets to go see a movie and invites Kotonoha. Sadly, he still clings to Sekai's teat when it comes to romance and tries to get her advice on what movie they should watch. I get to choose between a parody version of Tolkien's Silmarillion and a generic romance called Triangle Love. Being the geek that I am, I choose the fantasy, which works out since Kotonoha is a fan of the original book. Booyah! Sadly, Sekai's been giving Makoto unrealistic expectations for their date. Not that someone can't score big on a first date, but it's completely up to the mood and compatibility between the people involved. Either way, he tries to hold Kotonoha's hand at the theater, which she rejects, and when he goes to kiss her on the train, she slaps him. He really should have asked for permission first. Turns out Kotonoha is afraid of aggressive men, as her large bust got her a lot of unwanted attention from boys at school, causing girls to falsely label her as promiscuous. Poor girl. Thankfully, Makoto does the right thing on his own, apologizing, promising not to force himself on her, and asking to start over. This could be the end of some relationships, but Kotonoha really does like Makoto. Sekai warns her that if she doesn't show it, however, she could lose him. This prompts Kotonoha to meet with Makoto and passionately kiss him. Basically, he lucked out. In his favor, though, communication is everything, and Kotonoha isn't always good at that. Makoto and Kotonoha seem to be hitting it off, improving their communication, until Makoto proves he hasn't learned jack shit. At another movie, he holds her hand. Sure, she doesn't stop him this time, but last I checked, silence isn't consent. She does smile and blush at least. Still, dude, you've gotta ask until you know her feelings better. He screws up again at school, embracing her from behind. My options are kinda sleazy, between now you won't be cold, or stay still. It's not fair, since if I really had it my way, I wouldn't be in this mess. Turns out saying nothing gives you the chance to apologize, but I didn't know that at first. Thinking silence would have been equally creepy, I decided to go with the first option as the lesser of evils. The same mentality applied to my next choice. All the options sucked, so I at least picked a compliment. While the game appears to reward me for it, I don't think this is okay, and I'm proven right when she asks Makoto to stop. When she suggests we go back to class, I agree, going on damage control. While she doesn't have to, Kotonoha sends us an apology text. I choose to respond with, "Don't worry about it," because, well, none of that was her fault. To be fair though, him admitting he wants to hold her is also reasonable, but those are words he should have said before grabbing her. Wanting to spend more time with Makoto, Kotonoha decides to go home on the train with him rather than waiting till it's less crowded. The next choice is either a mistranslation or a typo, as I think it's supposed to say, "Why didn't you wait today?" Choosing it lets Kotonoha explain how she wants to be with you. Telling her she should have waited would have been pretty douchey. Now, Japan's trains and subways can indeed get packed like sardines. I've experienced it firsthand. You will be touching people, and skeevy shit can happen indeed as a result. Disaster strikes, and Makoto's hand is pinned against Kotonoha's breast. Accidents happen, so I choose to move my hand. It doesn't work, but at least I tried. She embarrassingly admits it can't be helped, but the game gives you the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. I don't oblige. Makoto calls her to apologize. We're then given the choice between, "I want to touch you," and "That's why I'll stay away from you." This one was debatable. Clearly, the relationship is at an impasse. Makoto wants physical intimacy, and Kotonoha doesn't, at least not yet. While it'd be manipulative to say, "Sleep with me or we're done," I can't blame someone for wanting that out of a relationship, in the same way that people go into relationships knowing they eventually want kids. Maybe it's just me, but I would take things slowly. If Makoto would just stop grabbing her on impulse, I'd feel more comfortable having him be a bit more forthright. Thus, I don't choose either. Kotonoha knows she's disappointing him, but the ball's in her court, not his. As it stands, he's freaking her out. When Sekai hears about this, she wonders if it's Makoto's fault for being inexperienced, and offers herself up for him to practice on, no strings attached. Sorry, but no, that would be cheating, and would hurt everyone involved. He goes for it in the anime like a dumbass, and I ain't having that. Despite doing the right thing here, Makoto still goes off and does shit I don't approve of. Rather than trying to work through each other's insecurities around intimacy, Makoto figures that if Kotonoha won't put out, he's going to put the relationship on hiatus, whatever the hell that means. It basically feels like he's saying, "We're still dating, but we're not going anywhere until you hike up your skirt." If sex is that important to him, he should just break up with her, though I don't have control over any of it. So it's time for the school festival, and the girls have set up a secret lounge in the haunted house where couples can sneak away and bang on campus. Kotonoha's stuck running the damn thing since all her classmates have plans for the festival. In prep, she runs into Makoto, and we get the choice between saying hi or how are you. I certainly wouldn't ignore her, and considering I never decided to take a break from her to begin with, I choose to try and show some actual concern for her well-being. After an awkward conversation, Makoto gets to decide whether he's regretting his idiotic decision, or if he's giving up on her. My answer is obvious. Turns out Makoto's best friend Taisuke is aiming to ask Sekai out to the festival. He first thought Makoto was dating her, but learned we're dating someone else. The game gives me the opportunity to deny it, and while it's none of Taisuke's business, I don't feel there's a reason to pretend like we're not dating Kotonoha. Thus, Taisuke gets our blessing in pursuing Sekai, but we are given the chance to potentially veto it at the last second. Nope, let him do what he wants. Sekai's friends know she likes Makoto, and push her to pursue it despite knowing he's already in a relationship. She calls to invite him to the festival, and we get the choice of answering or ignoring the phone. From Makoto's point of view, though, he has no idea why Sekai is calling, and it'd be rude not to answer. Just because you pick up the phone doesn't mean you're endorsing the nature of the call. If that were the case, I'd be broke, having to say yes to every telemarketer. Taisuke finds out Makoto's dating Kotonoha, and that she's stuck at the haunted house all day, and forces a reunion. He asks if we're really in a relationship, and we can either confirm or deny it. Of course we're still dating, despite Makoto trying to sabotage my choices at every turn. Things are looking good until Makoto's friend from middle school, Otome, tries to invite him to see the festival. Despite me declining her advance, Makoto winds up going anyway just because Kotonoha says it's okay. Moron. He wastes precious time with Otome until he learns how Kotonoha's class all ditched her with tending to the haunted house. He suddenly realizes how much of a fool he's been and runs to her. On the way, he's called out by one of Sekai's friends, who mentions Sekai wants to dance at the bonfire with him. We're given the option of going there instead, but how impulsive does a guy gotta be? So we finally reach Kotonoha, with the festival almost over, and she's been missing us something fierce. Knowing about the secret sex room, she invites Makoto to take her virginity. This is actually the first time we get to choose that we love her, which at this point seems manipulative as fuck. While it's great that Kotonoha has decided to experiment with intimacy, it's essentially being fueled by shame and neglect. Makoto essentially created an ultimatum, which could have been avoided if he took her back before she was ready to screw him. Oh well, at least she's happy. It's not the end result I'm pissed at, but rather the path that was taken to get there. Obviously I can't show it, though I really want to, but there are choices while they make love. The funniest of which being whether or not you ask Kotonoha to put on your condom. For some reason, if you don't have her do it, Makoto prematurely blows his load on her face with next to no stimulation. Not to shame anyone. She's certainly hot enough to warrant that reaction on her own, but I don't know how having her put the condom on suddenly prevents the eruption. In my case, I got lucky, as having her do it sounded fun, allowing me to see the entire H scene, even though it in no way harms the overall route. While we were laying carpet, Taisuke asked Sekai to dance at the bonfire. Surprisingly, she actually said yes. After the festival, he scores tickets to a water park and invites Makoto and Kotonoha for a double date. Sekai mentions she needs a new swimsuit. We get to choose whether to get excited about it or even go with her to pick it out, neither of which are okay, so I keep my mouth shut. Sekai winds up going with an inflatable top, and even with it, she can't match Kotonoha's bust. Regardless, both girls are phenomenal. Sekai, clearly not satisfied by Taisuke, once again offers to be Makoto's sex buddy, but he refuses. Glad they didn't make that a choice, I shouldn't have to say it more than once. She starts crying, and we're given the option to hold her hand or apologize. Well, I thought I'd made myself clear before, but that won't make her feelings just up and vanish. While apologizing is a reasonable choice, I keep silent. To me, it seemed like one of those things she just needs to cry out. Still, Sekai feels the best way to give up on Makoto is to give him a rather tongue-lathered kiss, which Kotonoha finds out about. While she knows it's not Makoto's fault, it still bothers her. As such, when Kotonoha requests a kiss of her own, I oblige. She deserves it. Makoto's confused, but not as confused as I am during this next choice between that Sekai and that Kotonoha. My logic was that I already understood Kotonoha's motivation. She doesn't want any other girls taking her boyfriend away, and so she boldly demanded a public kiss. Sekai, on the other hand, forced herself on Makoto, and I felt like this should be addressed urgently before it gets further out of hand. I chose Sekai, not because I was approving the kiss, but rather the opposite, but the game interpreted it differently. Still, it appears Sekai intends to move on, dating Taisuke officially. The game might want me to feel spiteful or jealous, but nah, I'll just congratulate them. Though it's pretty clear Sekai doesn't actually have feelings for Taisuke. She's just lonely. The two of them use sex to avoid any real intimacy. On the other hand, Kotonoha goes out of her way to request getting down on the school rooftop, which I humbly oblige. I know I said I'd be going for decency, but that was more a matter of not being a two-timing jackass. I don't see anything wrong with consensual lovemaking between classes. Boy, my high school experience wasn't nearly that awesome. Though it's worth noting that if you decline sex with Kotonoha, Makoto heads downstairs and witnesses Sekai and Taisuke getting it on, and he gets roped into a three-way. Makoto gets oral from Sekai, but can still proceed to Kotonoha's happy ending while keeping the whole thing a secret. I'm sorry, but just because someone isn't in the mood doesn't mean they're DTF with somebody else. Makoto's all like, "Whoops, how did I wind up in this chair with my pants down?" Oof. That said, because I did get it on with Kotonoha, she and Makoto come back from the rooftop and find the end result of Sekai's fun with Taisuke, only to learn that it wasn't that fun at all. Taisuke friggin' lied to Sekai, didn't use a condom, and came inside her. Sadly, Taisuke has no remorse for his actions, which I'm fairly sure qualify as assault. While Makoto isn't dating Sekai, I still feel like he could be a genuinely concerned friend about this and see if she wants to press charges or something. Ultimately though, Taisuke just kinda gets away with it, and their relationship continues. Instead, Makoto goes home that night and faps to his memory of seeing Sekai in the hallway. Afterward, he gets roped into another double date, which is secretly a front to help Taisuke pick out a Christmas gift for Sekai. Turns out though, Sekai doesn't seem to want anything superficial. She's still got feelings for Makoto. Kotonoha is pretty oblivious to this, however, and informs Sekai that now that Kotonoha's excited to sleep with Makoto, he's no longer as interested in her. Well, another development I have no control over. To try and win back Makoto's heart and libido, Kotonoha plans to reserve an expensive hotel room on Christmas Eve. It seems like a perfect fairy tale romance to Sekai, who is pained just to hear about it. Sekai's friends notice her feeling depressed and try to get Makoto to hang out with them. We're given the choice to go or not, but I choose not to. I've never given Sekai any hope of a relationship, and I don't think I'm gonna be the solution to her problems. Nonetheless, her friends blame me for her sorrow, and I admit that I'm the reason. I can admit that, but it's not like I need to feel guilty. I've done nothing to lead her on. Sekai knows it too, and she's lucky to have caring friends who can help her through these inevitably sad feelings. It's a harsh truth that just because you like someone, that doesn't mean they'll return your feelings. This leaves Makoto and Kotonoha to bang to their heart's content while Santa watches with a bucket of fried chicken. So yeah, I managed to avoid pissing the girls off to the point of brutal murder. But should that really be that big of an accomplishment? In reality, that sort of thing should be the result of horrible ignorance and cruelty. In school days, however, it's just a matter of letting your guard down and letting Makoto undermine your authority. While it's totally fun to go through the game to unlock all its content, scandalous or otherwise, it's almost a joke saying players have any actual control over not just what happens, but how Makoto behaves in response to various choices. Because of all these frustrating options, School Days remains a lovable dumpster fire that teaches us what not to do in both relationships and game design. This can't be the only example either. Please feel free to take to the comments and point out your most frustrating choices in gaming, or even possible ways you would have changed the choices to be more reasonable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.